Hi, I'm Meg Healy from Burda Style, and today I'm going to go over some tips for sewing successful swimwear, and I'm going to be demonstrating on this pattern and actually going through step by step how to create these really cute kind of retro bikini bottoms. So I have everything that I need in front of me, and the first thing that you need to do is determine your size. So for bathing suit bottoms, make sure you refer to the size chart of the bathing suit pattern you are using and go with your hip circumference measurement. Now just remember, if you're comparing your body measurements to the pattern is going to be smaller than your body because this is called negative ease, and the stretch in the fabric will accommodate that negative ease and hold the spandex fabric on our body so it's nice and wearable and won't fall down while wearing, which is very important. So on these particular patterns, there is no seam allowance added. And this is actually a good thing for a lot of sewists. I know I love this because you can add the seam allowance width that you like to sew with. So if you're using a serger, make sure you do a test stitch on your serger and measure that serger width, and that's the amount that you add to your size line. So for stitches, I talked a little bit about different stitches that you can use for stretch fabric. Obviously a serger, but you can also use stretch thread that has elastic right built in, so you don't need a specialty stitch. You just can use a straight stitch, and the stretch in the thread will stretch with your fabric. And for those type of stitches on the regular sewing machine, I like to add just about 3/8 of an inch of allowance. And serger, use that serger width. So now let's talk about elastic. For swimwear, it's very important to elasticate the edges, especially around the waist and the leg holes. So the kind of rule of thumb for elastic, whatever your elastic width is, that's the amount you add to your leg holes and your waistline. So I like to use 1/2 of an inch with elastic. I feel like that's a good width, but not too thick. And sometimes, if it's a high-waisted bottom, I like to use a nice 1-inch wide elastic. So you can use your preferred elastic width. Just make sure you add that amount on the area it gets sewed to on your pattern. So now we're going to go over our gusset. Your pattern, depending on which pattern you're using, it may include a gusset piece or it may not. And so the gusset piece gets sewn into the crotch area, just provides extra coverage and makes for a more professional finished swimwear garment. So if you want to draft one yourself, just cut out your front bikini bottom pattern piece, and using a curved ruler, I measured up here from the crotch line about 4 inches, and just using a curved ruler, I just drew a nice little curve into my leg hole. And note, this is only on the front pattern piece. Then I took a blank piece of paper and I just traced out to my gusset line, my crotch line, and my center front, and I did this after my seam allowance was added, so I didn't have to add it again. And then you just cut it out and cut one of your lining fabric. Now, speaking of fabric, for swimwear fabric, it needs to have a certain amount of stretch to it, and I like to use a nice blend with a good amount of stretch to it. So what you can do is use this stretch and recovery gauge right here. And you take your fabric and you fold it along one grain line, and I'm just going to hold it up here, and I'm going to place a pin in this first 5 inches like so. And for swimwear suitable fabrics, you want a stretch factor of about 75 to 100. You don't want to use a fabric that's anything less than 75%. So I'm going to have my pins on these 2 points. I'm going to hold my hands, and I am going to stretch as far as it will go, and where this pin hits, that's how much stretch is in the fabric. So that's my one grain line, and I'm going to fold it the other way so I can find the called the DOGS, but it stands for the direction of greatest stretch. And the direction of greatest stretch needs to go across the body. So you need to do this to know how to lay your swimwear pattern pieces on your fabric. So there we go, stretching it like so. So cut out all of your pieces and let's get sewing. So the first thing you'll need to do to sew this bikini bottom is these draped pieces, number 7 on my pattern. You pin them right sides together along the top and bottom edge, and we are just going to stitch them together along those edges, leaving the sides open. So I have already gone ahead and done this and also basted 2 rows of stitches, leaving long thread tails so I can gather the sides. So I'm just going to start gathering them until they are the width of inside your side seam of your front bikini piece. So just keep gathering them, making sure to be careful and not break your threads. So you gather them like so. Until you leave your elastic width at the top and at the bottom, and I have just stitched them already in place along the sides. So you gather, you lay on your front piece, and you baste in place along the side. So now I'm going to grab my back piece and my gusset piece. So I have my front right side up with these pieces sewn in place, and I place my back panty piece right sides together with my front lining up the crotch, and I take my gusset piece right side facing down on the back. So I have 3 layers, and I'm going to sew them all together. I'm going to use my regular sewing machine and my stretch thread. I'm just sewing this at the seam allowance that I've added to my crotch pieces. And I'm sewing through 3 layers of fabric and just doing a straight stitch with my stretch thread and back stitching at the front and the back. So now what you are going to do is open your pieces with the wrong side up, and then you take your gusset piece and flip it to the front side, and look at how nicely that is finished on the inside of the bathing suit piece. So now I'm just going to quickly baste my side gusset edges to my front leg holes, just to hold them in place, because we are elasticating these edges, and it's just easier if these pieces act as one. So I'm just going to do a quick little stitch there. And there. So now I'm going to match up the side seams, and I'm just going to serge them together. But if you just have your regular sewing machine, just sew a simple straight seam, and I'm just going to serge those side seams together. now we have our side seams serged into place, and next is to elasticate our leg holes like so. And what you're going to do is actually stretch the elastic as you serge it around your leg hole circumference, overlapping it at the crotch seam like so. And make sure you stretch the elastic and not the actual garment. So, and then once the leg holes and the waistband are elasticated, you are going to flip it to the wrong side and top stitch it into place. And I like to switch just to a zigzag stitch for the top stitching, but you can use whatever stitch preference that you like. And then just continue along the entire leg hole until you have a top stitch leg hole like so. And the last thing that you're going to do once everything is elasticated is finish up your knot. So you're going to sew piece number C on this particular pattern. It's a draft it yourself rectangle, and you pinch in the center, you wrap that piece around, and you pin and stitch that in place. So let's take a look at our finished one, our knot sewn in place, everything top stitch, and that's how you sew a pair of swimwear bottoms.